everybody, it's Sam here from FPL Family and welcome to the next in our FPL X series. Today, I am joined by FPL royalty, the winner of the 2019-2020 FPL game, Josh Bull. Josh, thank you so much for joining me today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm still smiling whenever I hear someone say like, "Oh, the winner." It's like, yeah, it's a bit of a shock. Yeah, I'm a mathematician. We exist as an actual job. So yeah, I kind of spend my days doing like mathematical modelling of cancer. That's kind of my real job, not mathematical modelling of fantasy football.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because you've got this amazing skill in fantasy football, but yet the job that you actually do for a living is so important for the world that we live in. It's like these two massive things, and both of them connected by a mathematical brain, I guess. Now, for me, this is something that I'm really interested in, and I was just sending you this before we started recording this video. The impact of maths on FPL and your ability to play FPL, for me, is fascinating because there's definitely a connection there. A lot of good mathematicians are also good at FPL. Have you got any kind of thoughts on why that might be? Like, what is it about FPL that lends itself to a mathematician?
Yeah, so I think we're always really fond of saying in like the world of maths that it's really applicable, and like, you know, although I apply it to biology, there's like physics and just like abstract stuff where you can kind of start seeing maths and everything. And I think FPL is kind of no exception to that, if you like. I think thinking mathematically is a certain way of kind of looking at the world and looking at problems and trying to identify patterns and things like that, identify the sort of optimal solution to a problem. So, you know, I wasn't explicitly doing big calculations or anything to try and choose my team or anything like that.
I was hoping you were.
Yeah,
I was hoping you had some big formula and you could go, just put this in and you'll win it.
Yeah, I got some quite interesting emails from people that were like, "Oh, right, you've clearly got some formula. Like, you know, come and tell us what the you know."
Amazing.
And I had to be kind of like, what I should have done is just made something up.
You could have made millions on the back of it.
Yeah, and like then I could have retired before we get to the start of the season, and nobody would have known it didn't work.
Awesome. So do you have a spreadsheet for FPL? Is there kind of in your computer somewhere, or are you like me and it's all in a notebook and it's just kind of that the math is lending you to or leading you down a certain path, but actually you're kind of following your heart, or how is it?
Yeah.
How's it working?
So I definitely don't have a spreadsheet or anything like that. But I do spend a lot of time kind of trying out different transfers and seeing kind of how I think they fit with my kind of overall scheme, which is kind of in a nutshell, just trying to choose a team for the future, if you like. So although I think it may not be the optimal move for that particular week, I would much rather have players in my team that can sit there for sort of even up to sort of 9-10 weeks where I know that I'm not going to have to worry too much about them. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't seem to do. You know, particularly around like the start of this season with that blank game week, I'm seeing a lot of people who are kind of saying, well, I'm just not going to have any Man U or Man City players in my team. And, you know, that to me just feels like trouble when we get 4 or 5 weeks into the season and like, you know, how are you going to get them?
It's interesting to me that you've said that, because one of the things that the guys that always watch us will know is that last season for me was the first time where I haven't planned for game week 1, and I set my team up and it was like, let's be ready for game week 2 and game week 3, and I didn't have some of the big hitters that have really nice fixtures in game week 1. And game week 1 didn't go that well. I mean, it was okay. It was a solid enough game week, but it wasn't where it would normally have been for me. But then game weeks 2, 3 and 4, it was like bang, bang, bang. And then I had a nice overall rank at the end of it. And it's something that I learned on the back of last season. So it's good for me to hear from the current reigning champion of the world that was your strategy too. Because actually for me, sometimes with the FPL community at large, you get so caught up in, well, this guy's got a really nice fixture this week. but it's such a short-term view on FPL, and actually I think sometimes you do just need that broader step back, take a look and see where we go.
Yeah, it's the classic thing of it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah,
it's a 38-week season, and yeah, sure, in each one of those 38 weeks you might not have the best team. So I don't think I ever had an absolutely amazing game week rank. I just never had any which were really terrible as well. I kind of was just kind of consistently slightly above average.
Yeah.
But a lot of that was, just trying to bring in players who, they might not pay off this week, but I'm not going to be worrying about taking them out for a hit next week in order to get in somebody else. Just bringing in people for the long term. And kind of, I think that really paid off from a sort of week by week basis.
Amazing. And I think that's a really helpful and useful tip going into the new season is to kind of have that in mind, particularly as you say, because we have this highly unusual game week 1 where we're missing four teams, and in particular 3 of our big hitters, Man United and Man City, in terms of those attacking options, and then Burnley in terms of the defence that we all came to know and love last season. So I think that's really valuable and it's really worth thinking about. One thing I kind of wanted to talk to you about was how it felt that morning, because the season ended, you were number 2 in the world. I know if I was number 2 in the world, I'd be absolutely telling everybody that I finished 2nd in the world, delighted. So how does it feel when we fast forward a couple of weeks and you wake up on a Thursday morning, Friday morning, whatever day of the week it was, to an email from the Premier League to say, "Morning, Josh, you are now the game's champion"?
Yeah, I mean, it came completely out of the blue as far as I was concerned. So, I mean, I was very happy with 2nd place. Obviously I would have loved to have finished with the most points, but I was, just ecstatic to be higher than like 100,000. So like 2 was brilliant.
Yeah, amazing.
So yeah, I definitely enjoyed my bragging rights with my friends and my family and stuff. I was like, yeah, this is good. And then I just literally just checked my emails one morning and had this email that was like, oh yeah, you're going to be crowned the champion, and was just like, oh okay, fine, great, and went and got breakfast and stuff, and just it hadn't really sunk in at all.
Delayed reaction, right?
Oh, completely, yeah. I didn't I kind of thought that nobody would really care because it was all 2 weeks after the season had finished and everything. I was just like, well, I was 2nd and now I'm 1st. That's, yeah, great. And then as the morning was going on, I was like, hang on a minute, that actually happened. I didn't just imagine that. Yeah, it was all very strange.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it? And presumably since then your life's been a little bit different, because I imagine you've had a lot more interactions probably through Twitter than you were. I mean, I imagine it was growing anyway as you were kind of at number 2, number 3 in the top 10 in the world. But then on that morning, I'm assuming everybody who's anybody was just commenting on your posts, following you.
Yeah.
How's that been?
I mean, Twitter just went absolutely crazy. So I kind of decided a few years ago, oh, well, I won't use Twitter for socializing. I'll just use that for work. Yeah. So I basically only follow mathematicians working in biology.
I love it.
Yeah, and then there was this period a few weeks before the end of the season where I was first hit number 1, and kind of fantasy football Twitter found out that I was on there, and I gained sort of a couple of thousand followers that day, and was just like, wow, this is crazy. And then the day when when FPL tweeted about it and said, oh, congratulations for winning, it just went through the roof, and I just had to turn everything off. And
I bet your phone was just going bing, 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 wasn't it? Constantly.
Yeah. I mean, because I used to have notifications on for new followers and mentions and everything, because it would be yeah, and if anything happened, it'd be once a month or so, someone would tag me in something and be like, oh, here's an interesting paper. So it's oh yeah, I kind of need to know about that. And it just was non-stop.
Amazing.
So I was like, right, yeah, this is all going to have to go. I kind of took a step back.
As somebody who wasn't, because I'm right in thinking this was only your 2nd season playing FPL. So for somebody who the first season, and I remember when we did our Twitch stream with Rambo a couple of weeks ago, you were saying that actually the first season you weren't taking it that seriously. You were kind of making a lot of transfers and not too much worry about hits and those kind of things. And then obviously this season was different. So for somebody that's relatively new into the FPL community, to then have this kind of huge wave of following, and it must have been a bit of a culture shock. But I'm intrigued by this kind of the second season playing FPL. I know my second season playing FPL was a little bit better than my first season, but not as much as it was for you.
That was all I was aiming for. You know, although I've had a team for years, last season, or 2 seasons ago now, I guess, was the first time when I'd kind of taken it seriously.
Yeah.
But I wasn't taking it that seriously at the start. I was just kind of competing with my office mate and you know, and it wasn't until, so it's actually the Reddit community that I kind of, you know, joined around that time. And that kind of, you know, I would read a lot of posts on there that kind of taught me, oh, actually, I'm doing this wrong. You know, I'm not thinking about the game as a game. I'm just thinking of it as like oh, well, like they did well last week, so I'll put them in, and kind of, I wasn't being very strategic at all with it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so then this season I was like, right, well, I'm gonna do it properly from the start of the season. So, you know, I was kind of relying particularly on Reddit to kind of flag up people like Lundstrom that I probably would never have put in my team if I wasn't kind of trying to keep in touch with that community. And then, of course, as time went on this season, I got more involved in FPL Twitter.
Yeah.
Although, again, you know, I felt bad. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at a maths conference. So I was kind of tweeting about all of this maths that was going on. And then at the same time, trying to be like, oh, but also FPL is a thing. And like, don't, you know, there's, don't feel like you have to listen to all of this maths. Like, it's fine.
Oh, that's amazing. So and are you going to keep your 2 accounts? You're going to just keep them under the same account, or have you thought about trying to separate the 2 of them, or we just, because actually I think for me the maths thing, as I said to you before, you know, it plays a big part in the decisions that you make and in the strategies that you have. So in some ways, it's kind of nice that they're combining with each other in your one Twitter handle.
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine did say to me, sort of when I first started gaining Twitter followers, like, oh, you should make an FPL account. And I was like, nah, I'll be fine. And like in hindsight, you know, maybe I could have done that, but I think now it's just me. You know, if people aren't interested in hearing, you know, me saying things that I talk about, then that's fine. You know, no, I'm not trying to go out of my way to get as many followers as possible or anything. I just kind of think, you know, sometimes I talk about FPL, sometimes I'll talk about maths. Maybe I'll start talking about other things as well, now that I'm not just using it for work.
I mean, I like that. I think that's part of what makes the FPL community so great, is that it's made up of such diverse groups of people from all around the world, who all have different likes and dislikes, do different jobs, and you kind of see how that feeds into the decisions that they make and the things that they're doing. And you know, people up at different times of night because they're in different time zones around the world, and you see these conversations about Martial or whoever it is, and then they happen again 6 or 12 hours later when the rest of the world wakes up. And I love that about the FPL community, and I love the diversity that's in it. So I like it. I like the fact that your Twitter handle isn't just, you know, you talking FPL all the time. It's, you know, it's obviously that's what the FPL community are going to you for, is for your insight from last season, and also obviously as reigning champion for your insight into the coming season. Now this is going to go out on the 9th of September, so we've got 3 days until the game kicks off fully. How ready do you feel for the new game week? Because we're recording this a little bit in advance, so are you set, or is this going to be a team that you literally tinker with to the wire when the game week starts?
Yeah, so I suspect that I won't finalize it until like the day before, but I think by that point I'll be between sort of 1 or 2 different teams.
Yeah.
I think at the moment, a couple of weeks out, I'm still very much not certain that this is the team that I'm going to go with. And it's those big decisions for me at the moment about, how many players from City, United and Burnley will I have on my bench, or will I be looking to bring in? I'm even debating at the minute anyway, as someone that didn't take any hits last year, I'm now debating maybe it's worth just taking some early hits to get them in.
Did you take any hits last season at all?
I didn't take any last season at all. No.
Wow. See, no. and I think that's a really good strategy. I took a couple, but I think it was literally just a couple. I think it was 2 maybe over the course of the season. One of my key strategies has always been, and you can tell me if you think it's a good one or not, but one of my key strategies has always been to roll my transfers where possible, so that I nearly always have 2, on that very basis that it saves a hit. Because for me, one of the key issues that I have with FPL is sometimes getting to that player and it's like somebody starts doing well and I'm stuck because I can't budget for them. And that's going to be increasingly important, I think, this season because of this blank game week. So you mentioned earlier about Manchester City and Manchester United and how many assets you're going with, and the fact that some people in the community are saying, no, I'm ignoring them, they blank, I'll worry about them in game week 2. Is that, in your opinion, a valid strategy, or do you need to have a way to get these guys in?
I think it's a completely valid strategy. I don't think if you don't want to have Man United players and Man City players, you can quite happily make a team without them. I think for me personally, there are definitely players from those teams that I would like to have. So particularly De Bruyne, I'd like him in my team for as much of the season as possible. So at the moment, that's looking like, well, either, I don't really want him on my bench for game week 1 because that's a lot of money to be sat there.
For sure.
But, perhaps either I'm looking at using my transfer from game week 1 into game week 2 to bring him in, or I'm looking at seeing how many games I think I can get away with before I do it.
Yeah. It is a dilemma. It really is a dilemma this season, and it's adding a whole new dimension to the game. I think season 2021 is going to be defined by so many of these different elements that we haven't seen in any of the other seasons that I've played FPL with, early blank game weeks. Therefore, we're going to probably get some early double game weeks. We've got lots and lots of fixture congestion because the season is starting later and has still got to finish, presumably, because we've got Euros to fit in at some stage during 2021. So it is going to be a totally different strategy game. So the other thing that I'm intrigued by is how you plan for, if you plan for, your chip strategy, because most managers start the season with some indication or some thought in their mind of, when will my triple captain go? When am I going to wild card? When might I bench boost? And they have this idea, and then either some are very, very rigid and they decide that that's it, I'm following that path and that's the way I'm going to go, or it's a bit more fluid and it's kind of flexible. What was your strategy last season for your chips, and did it work? Did they pay off? Or are you going to follow the same thing next year?
So I did have a strategy planned out for back before we knew the season was going to be suspended.
Yeah.
And that basically meant that I was going into that suspension without my triple captain, but still with my free hit, my second wild card, and my bench boost. So I think it really changed the game that everybody basically got a free wild card.
Yes.
So that was useful. I definitely used it, but I think other people probably benefited from it more than me, if that makes sense, because my team was fairly well set up going into that. So had they said, "Oh, we're not going to do free wild card," I think I would have still been in a very comfortable position. In terms of the players in my team being players that I wanted for the rest of the fixtures.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of people had this strategy of change their team, optimize it completely for that first week back, and then play their bench boosts then.
Yeah.
And then, so people were bench boosting then and then wild carding the following week.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, so that was a really popular strategy.
Yeah.
And I basically thought, so I was looking at Chris McGowan's team as well, who was kind of up and around where. Yeah, well, so he'd only used one chip, I think,
right,
up until that point, which was just astounding. So I kind of thought I need to have something in my bank. Otherwise, I'm going to get to game week 34 and have nothing. And there's going to be people around me that have got something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I kind of consciously thought, okay, let's hold off with the wild card. I maybe won't have the best team for that first week back, but I'm going to have a team where I don't need to wild card for the next few weeks. And, you know, thinking, well, we don't know if more fixtures will get cancelled or anything.
Yeah.
So I thought having that flexibility might be really useful.
And it was.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a funny one because it basically meant in weeks 37 and 38, I played free hit and wildcard. So I essentially got a completely new team for each of those weeks.
Yeah.
And actually, it wasn't the best use of those. You know, I think on my free hit in particular, I only made about 3 changes, and they all cost me points.
I found I had my free hit for the final game week of the season, and I actually think that was the most stressful game week that I've ever had from an FPL point of view, because the fear is, as you've just said, that you bring in players and the players that you had before do better than the players that you have, because in that final game week of the season, you never really know, do you, what managers are going to do? You never really know for sure that you're going to get the starting 11 that you want to be starting in that game, particularly when we knew that Chelsea and Wolves and Manchester City, they had to go and are playing Europa League and Champions League football in August. So we kind of were like, is there going to be some rotation there? We obviously had an FA Cup final as well to contend with. So it was really stressful. I don't know how you coped. I mean, it was stressful enough for me in my place in FPL, but wow. I mean, would you hold your chips that long again?
No, so I think it wasn't that I was specifically thinking, well, I'm going to save that for the end. It was more with the free hits and not, you know, I was saving it for when there was going to be blank and double game weeks normally. Yeah. But then I kind of thought, well, the real thing that gives me is flexibility. So I'm just going to hang on to it until I feel like I need to play it. And actually, I didn't have a game week after the break where I felt, no, my team isn't right for this. I need to play my free hit or play my wild card. Yeah. And that was the main reason that I ended up with them at the end. So I don't think it was an intentional thing necessarily to save them for that long. I would certainly, you know, I think if it's the right time for your team to play it, then play it, and don't worry too much about what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, and I actually think that is probably the soundest piece of FPL advice that I've heard anyone give, because it's so easy, isn't it, within the Reddit community and within the Twitter community to hear people talk about certain players or certain strategies, and it then becomes the thing that you think you should do too, because so many people are doing it, and it's not always the right thing for your team and for the way that you're playing FPL. And I like that as a point, really, because FPL is such an individual game, and the players that you choose are, although they're chosen of course by hundreds of thousands of, maybe even millions in some cases, of other players, they're not chosen in the same pattern and in the same team with the same teammates across the community. So just because it's right for somebody else doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you. And I think chip strategy is 100% that. We as content creators mostly spout on about, you know, hold them for double game weeks, hold them for blank game weeks, because you'll want them at that stage. But sometimes they're not the right weeks for you and your individual teams, and sometimes your teams are actually set up okay to cover that, right?
Yeah, and I think that's something that became particularly clear post the restart, when it was becoming clear that there weren't going to be double game weeks kind of coming left, right and centre, and people were having to make these decisions of, well, when do I play my triple captainship? Yeah. Well, I'll just play it on a good player who's got a good fixture and is in form, and, you know, just hope that they get me points. And I think a lot of the time we worry too much about going, well, I have to play it in a double game week, even though I want to play it on Salah, but one of their games is Man City away, and the other game is I don't know, Sheffield United or something. And you kind of think, well, it's not that that's a bad time to play it, but
could there be better?
Exactly. The two bad fixtures outweigh having one good fixture.
Yeah.
Maybe not, and that's a lot of the fun of the game, is that neither of those are wrong decisions to make. One of them will pay off, the other one might not, but it doesn't make it wrong.
Where did you play your triple captainship? Like, who got that privilege?
I think Salah got it.
Was it during that double game week back in January?
Yeah.
Because I think that was a popular game week, wasn't it? It was either Salah or Mane. I decided I wanted to try and boost my rank and went with Firmino over Salah, which ended up being an okay decision. And I think that's interesting, isn't it? Is the triple captainship as a differential game changer. So listening to you talk about that, I was in my head, I was thinking, I wonder if he used it in a single game week on a random player that he just had a feeling on. And try to use it as a differential. Let's get me up to where I want to be, or did you just sort of almost? Because for me, Salah in a double game week, in the same as like Kevin De Bruyne in a double game week, or even Sterling in a double game week, feels like a nice safe pick. Mane was too, right? It was just unfortunate that he got injured.
Yeah, so very unlucky.
It was, and is it? So is it in your mind that the triple captainship is, because I always see it as a way to differentiate my team from everybody else and try to boost my rank. But actually, I'm having listened to you, I'm now wondering whether I should actually see the triple captainship more as just an opportunity to, rather than gamble, to put it on somebody who I know will do well in a certain game week or at a certain time of the year, instead of, oh, well, he's got a double, so I'll put it on him then. Might be better to hold off.
Yeah, so I guess the one thing about it, so I don't think it's as powerful as we like to think.
Yes.
At the end of the day, you're getting one player's points one more time.
Yeah.
So I think the advantage of doing it in that double game week is obviously you get it two more times.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a big benefit. And I'm not saying never play it in a double game week or anything like that. But sometimes there are matches where you think, well, even though it's in a double game week, I'm not actually expecting that player to get any points from that.
Yeah.
So, maybe I should, maybe there's another option.
Yeah, because actually Man City's double game week this year was quite tough. And I never really fancy Manchester City players in a double game week, because there's always that fear of the Pep roulette and the fact that, Sterling might get 90 minutes in one match, but then he might only get 10 in another, because that's what Pep likes to do to us. So I'm always very wary of Man City doubles and triple captaining somebody during them. I kind of like the Liverpool ones because you sort of know where you are with Klopp. You kind of know that Salah, Mane, Firmino, they're always likely to be starting unless they're injured, and then you wouldn't armband them anyway. It's that kind of safety net, I think, with the triple captain as well, isn't it? It's picking a player that you feel as safe as you can be, that they're going to return something, because the last thing you want is a triple captain blank.
Yeah. So for me, I've talked a fair bit about my strategy with premiums, and just being that, like, I like to be patient with them. I like to, if I've got Salah in my team, he's just going to stay in my team for the whole season if I can.
Yeah.
Because I feel like in the long run, yes, they'll have bad weeks, but they'll also have good weeks. Part of the reason that I don't like having that many Man City players is because they take that to the extreme.
Yes,
so
they do.
You go from like, yeah, okay, maybe Salah has a week where he gets 2 points, then he has a week where he gets like 10 points. Great. Whereas with a lot of the City players, it's like, well, they might get 0 or they might get 20.
Yeah.
And over the course of the season, they tend to average, they finish up at about the same kind of levels of points, right, as those safer Liverpool bets.
Yeah.
But if you're picking your triple captain, exactly, it's so much more stressful. And it's like, if you play your triple captain on one of those City players, yes, they might have that week where they score 20, right, brilliant. But it might also be the week where they just sit on the bench.
Yeah.
And you just don't know. Whereas at least with the Liverpool players, you kind of think, well, if they don't score, they don't score. But at least I'm getting that 1 point from Mane. It's better than getting no points, you know. So it's a lot of personal taste. And, you know, I was thinking, if you've got someone like Aguero, we were saying the other day, I think, you know, if he sits on your team for the whole thing, yes, he might only play 30 minutes this game, 60 minutes that game, and score, you know, more points than anyone else in that time. But at the end of the season, you're going to end up with a similar number of points to if you had, you know, Salah sat there instead. But you're going to be so much less stressed out about that.
I can't cope with Aguero. He's the one FPL player that I just can't deal with. I can't deal with the stress, because every season I sit down and I write my game week 1 team and I think, oh, Aguero. And I always get to him and I think, I know you're going to score well this season because you're Aguero and you always score well. So you're undoubtedly going to be a good pick. But I just can't cope with every week waiting on that team sheet thinking, are you going to start? Like, at least with Sterling and with KDB in the middle, you feel like you get a bit more regularity with their starts. And if they do start, you feel like they're going to get a good chunk of the game. Whereas with Aguero, I kind of feel like he's just as likely to bring him on for 20 minutes at the end of the match. There's all that kind of Jesus stuff that goes alongside it. And will this be the season that he really breaks into the team? Can Aguero stay injury free? I just can't cope with that. There's so much stress in FPL as it is, with trying to make my other 10 players on my pitch work, plus try and find some way, particularly this season, to have a bench that actually has some playing players on it. To then have the stress of, well, is Aguero actually going to start? Like, I'd far rather invest either the same money for this season in Kane, or ideally even some less money in the likes of Jimenez or even Danny Ings, because whilst they might not necessarily return with the same level that you can get in terms of like hat tricks from Aguero, Jimenez is consistent, right? And it's week in, week out that you know, one goal. And over the course of the season, they'll level out if you spend the money better elsewhere. So it is one of those really tough decisions with Pep and his roulette, and particularly, I think, with what to do about Aguero.
Yeah, and the more that I think about it, and the more I've been doing quite a lot of analysis recently, and the more that I look at that, the more convinced I am that premiums aren't, you know, they're not what wins you the game, because at the end of the day, they're premium players because they'll score more points than everyone else, and everyone has them.
Yes.
You know, and I may have Salah and you may have Mane, but over the course of the season, they're going to come out roughly comparably.
Yes.
So unless you want to play the game of, I'm going to rotate premium players and try and guess which ones and use my valuable transfers on, you know, bringing in that player instead of this player. You know, yes, it might pay off, but it's so much, you know, you're relying on hitting the peak of every single one of those players.
And it's hard, that.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster because, you know, you bring in a great player against a really low-placed team, and then they lose. And meanwhile, you know, Salah that you've just gotten rid of scores a hat trick against, you know, someone that you just weren't expecting. Because the reason they're premium players is because they can do that.
So in which case then, if you're saying that you stick with your premiums, and I know last year, very much like myself, you had KDB the whole way through, and I think Salah as well. Did you say you had Salah all the way through the season, or pretty much all the way through the season?
Yeah, I think he might have been in and out for a couple of weeks. But yeah, certainly the intention was to keep him.
And actually, I feel like you and I are similar in that vein, in that we are quite loyal to the players that cost us a lot of money. And in part, my loyalty comes from the fact that I have a lot of value in them, because they all go up in price. And therefore, if I want to get rid of them, it's very hard to bring them back in. So I'm wondering then what the difference is, because you finished, 3,498 places above me. Now, is it then that you're better, probably, at picking the slightly... Are you picking complete differentials? Because I think that's what I do. I look at the differential picks and I think, right, I'm going to have all these premiums, and then I'm going to go rogue, and I'm going to pick like some real kind of out there, like Snodgrass, who did really well in that one game week. But then, of course, you know, it's Snodgrass, so he's never going to get 18 points every week. So I'm wondering whether is the difference that actually you're a bit safer with that kind of second tier of picks that you have. Like, how rogue do you go?
Yeah, so I think I certainly wouldn't say it's because I'm better at picking those differential picks. I think
I probably would.
yeah. Well, I think, you know, I'd be lying if I said there was no element of luck involved in FPL, because there clearly is.
Yes.
You know, and anyone that triple captained Mane for 1 point this year will tell you, yes, I was unlucky, and they'll be completely right.
Yeah.
So the question is, well, where do you have to get lucky?
Yeah.
Like when at what point does that luck come into it? So for me, I should give a little plug, actually. So I say I've been doing some kind of maths analysis. So I think when this comes out, it'll be yesterday.
We're time traveling now.
Yeah. In the future, yesterday I will have done this thing. No, so coming out on Tuesday the 8th, I'm doing a public lecture for the maths department here at Oxford, which should be broadcast out over the internet for you to go and track down.
We'll pop a link in the description.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be great. Yeah. But that will hopefully, I say this because I haven't finished writing it yet, be about applying maths to fantasy football.
Amazing.
And one of the things that I'm really interested in testing is this idea of, well, where does the luck come in?
Yeah.
What do I do in my management strategy? And actually, my gut feeling on it is my management style should consistently do better than a kind of more aggressive style.
Okay.
But I expect people with the more aggressive style to beat me, right? Which sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? And basically, I think my style of being very patient, stick with the premiums, you know, a very low variance essentially, is to minimize that variance. And I think you should end up with a consistently kind of good score. But I think, you know, so somebody on Twitter has done a lot of work finding the optimal team, and has managed to make a team which scores like 4,900 points or something like that over the course of last season.
Wow.
Right? Which is crazy high, right? But it relies on doing these transfers where it's like, well, I'll take Salah out that week and bring in, you know, Snodgrass.
Yeah.
And it's like, nobody or most people would just not do that, because you can't see the future, right? But when you've got 7 million, 8 million people playing, you know, if half of those people are doing kind of crazy differentials, and they pay off, you know, yes, there might be 3.5 million people where it's not worked for them at all, and they're right at the bottom of the table. But if those kind of crazy gambles had paid off, they'd be miles out ahead of everyone else.
Yeah.
So I think, although that to me isn't a good strategy, because, you know, it doesn't mean that I'm more likely to get ahead than anyone else, right? But equally, I don't think you can just spend all of your time playing it safe, because you will get beaten by these people that have got the differentials.
Yeah.
So you have to strike a balance somewhere.
This is really interesting.
I mean, I think it's a really, well, I hope it's a really interesting kind of subject.
It is, because I think, you know, for me in seasons gone by, my rank has always been okay. And the last couple of seasons, since we've been doing this, I have found myself being more loyal to my big hitters. So unless they get injured or do something outrageous, like get sent off, they stay. So Salah and KDB, Trent, they stay put and they don't leave my team. And that leaves me with a very small batch of players then that can be transferred out. And in seasons gone by, the last couple of seasons where I finished sort of just outside the top 10k, I've been a bit more happy to take a risk on the basis that might be a risk that gets me inside the top 10k, because I think you get to that point where you think, well, it's all or nothing, and so I'll bring in whoever it is that's got a nice fixture and has been doing okay, or even more rogue, has got a nice fixture and has absolutely done nothing for weeks and weeks, but yeah, I'll show a bit of faith. But my key backbone of my team has stayed the same. But this season, I think I rolled my transfer more. I made less transfers over the course of the season. And in fact, when we were recording the final FPL pod of the season, I think I made something like 13 less transfers than the guys closest to me in the league, which over the course of a 38-week season is a massive amount of transfers. Because I think that the majority of my team just were doing okay. And when they're doing okay and ticking over the points, you feel like, okay, well, there's no need to remove them. And yes, I know that this player may do really well and I don't own them, but over the course of the few weeks, I'm probably better off with the guy that I have, but then I'm still trying to make some out there picks. So the Snodgrass one was an out there one. And I felt like St. Maximan was, for me, in Project Restart. Like, he was very, very lowly owned and nobody was really talking about him and everyone was writing Newcastle off. And I just had a feeling about him. Couldn't even tell you why in particular. But actually, he ended up being a really good pick and stayed for the whole of Project Restart then. And I think there is, what you're saying, it feels, I can very much relate to it. It feels very much like the game that I tried to play last season. And that gives me hope that I can kind of replicate it again this coming season, because it's not something that, you know, if you'd have come on here and go, wow, I just went, I did this and I did that, and it was very much luck driven, then it's like, oh, well, how do I do that? But what you're saying is, well, actually, I'm loyal to my players that are big and important in my team, and the other changes I make are measured and thought through on the basis of a extended period of time.
Yeah, and I think you're completely right in that. I mean, that's where a lot of the fun of the game is, and a lot of the skill of the game is to look at someone like St. Maximum and say, well, actually, I think I can see something here that other people are overlooking. And I think, I mean, I'm going to call it like Antonio syndrome, because I got really messed up by that Norwich match.
Did you have him?
No, but everybody else did. Yeah. So I was like 30 points clear of everyone at that point. And then Antonio and Sterling in that 1 week, and I didn't have either of them. And everyone seemed to have captained Sterling and had Antonio, and suddenly it was, you know, all to play for. And for me, you know, I could sit here and moan about, oh, well, like, I think people were just lucky that like Antonio got those goals, you know. But you know, at the same time, that's the game, and there will have been, yeah, exactly. And like, there'll be plenty of people that had Antonio, but also triple captain Mane, right? Yeah. And it's like sometimes the luck goes your way, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
So I do think that the difference between sort of 3,499 and 1 tends to be, well, I had those chances which went my way. You know, there was, I happened to have Vardy and he scored in the 90th minute. And if he hadn't have done, it would have been different.
One of the big things that you had over me this season is your keeper. So my goalkeepers worked really well. I had rotating keepers this season. It's the first time I've really done rotating keepers. And I did that through to Project Restart. And at Project Restart, I was like, no, I think I still want to keep rotating keepers. So I kept Henderson because he'd been unbelievable. And every other week there was a nice fixture for Sheffield United. I was like, I'll keep him. And it came down to a straight choice between going with the safe, lovely, comfortable gloves of Nick Pope, or going for Foster at Watford.
Oh, no.
And in my mind, the relegation thing was a big factor, because I overthought it. I know I did, because it was at that point of the season where Project Restart was about to happen. We had this unlimited transfers thing. So I just brought in a player that was great for that week. And then the week after, when I was wildcarding, it was like, right, I've got to get this right now. I've got to get the right keeper. And I spent too long thinking about it. And actually, I think sometimes the obvious pick is to just go with the one that's been in form. And I learned that as a lesson for this season. It is something.
having said that, had you not gone Foster, had you gone McCarthy, say,
that would have been fine too.
Like,
and the annoying thing is, McCarthy was the one I took out.
Oh, no.
So it was just one of those days. But it is what it is.
That's the thing. You just don't know,
No.
and there's always going to be those choices that you look at and you think, oh, well, like in hindsight, I should have done this differently.
Yes.
But I've said somewhere before that I think it's very similar to poker in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
In that a lot of people, when you play poker, you can, be betting away and you lose and you think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I did the wrong thing. Whereas if you talk to a kind of people that play a lot of poker, they know that sometimes you do the right thing, but it doesn't work. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, you go all in against someone else and it's 99% sure that you're going to win.
But you
and
don't.
they get that 1%. Yeah. And you lose. That doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. You made the right decision. It just didn't pan out.
Oh, you've made me feel lots better about my Foster pick anyway. All right, Josh.
Having said that, I think Foster was the wrong decision.
He was. He definitely was the wrong decision. There was a couple of them, and he was definitely one of them. It has been so lovely talking to you. Before I go, I am going to just get you to give the guys that are watching this one key piece of advice from, we'll say it one more time before you go, the current world FPL champion. So give us one thing, if the guys pick up nothing else from our chat about how bad a pick Foster was, what is your one piece of kind of golden advice for them for the 2021 season?
I'm going to go with have faith in your premiums. We've talked about it a lot, but I think just because they're having an off week, don't ditch them, because you will get hit. Like, you will get annoyed when they recover their form and start scoring stuff.
Amazing. I will be keeping Salah and KDB and Fernandez and all of these premiums that I want. I'm about to go and now work out how I get more of them into my FPL team. All
15 of them.
All of them. In fact, maybe I'll just ring up FPL and ask, can I please have 200 million as my budget? Just don't tell everybody else, and it'll be all right. Josh, it has been so lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for coming to talk to me. Fingers crossed that we can see you replicate your successes again in the 1920 season in 2021.
1 in 7 million chance or something.
I would love to see it. I'd love to see it. I think you'd be the first back-to-back winner in history. Amazing. I think
I'll be happy with having a good season.
That's very modest. Love it. All right, Josh, thank you ever so much. The rest of you guys, I will see you as usual on Sunday night for a live stream to look back at game week 1. Take care, everyone. Bye.